Hello, I'm Josh Hallam, you are listening to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we talk about films we think are underrated, underseen, or we just want to talk about them. It's a listener suggestion this week when we're talking about Small Soldiers. So, let's see what we think. Alice. War. Huh.
Good God, yeah.
What?
What is it good for?
Absolutely
Making
nothing.
little toys.
Yeah. Small Soldiers. So this is a listener suggestion which you've picked from our vast raft of emails and all that we get about listener suggestions. So, I believe it was picked by Simon.
It was picked by Simon, yes.
So, what is it about and why has Simon said he's going to pick it?
So, Small Soldiers is a DreamWorks film. It's an action comedy all about two factions of toys that become sentient after being programmed with a military microprocessor. The two factions are the Commando Elite, that are like your all-American soldiers, and the Gorgonites, who are funky-looking alien-type creatures who, according to the Commando Elite, must be destroyed. The toys wreak havoc on a neighborhood after they arrive at a toy shop that seems to be mostly run by a 14-year-old boy called Alan. He vows to help the Gorgonites, making enemies of the Commando Elite who are able to fashion weapons and physically assault and restrain people, mostly Alan's neighbours and friends. So this is the message that Simon sent to us. He says, "To Alice and Josh, you have a great podcast." Oh, thank you, Simon.
You shouldn't have. Oh.
He goes on, he says, "I've been listening through the films I have seen and trying to watch through the ones I haven't that you've covered. My recommendation for a film to cover is Small Soldiers, a film I loved as a kid that I don't hear talked about much anymore. Also, having seen the ratings online, I believe it to be underrated, maybe a bit underseen, but it is over 20 years old, so maybe that's why it's not as talked about. All the best from Simon." Well, thank you so much for your message, Simon. And if anyone else wants to tell us how great the podcast is,
Cheers.
feel
Cheers,
free.
Simon.
Cool.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. And we will pay the money into your account.
Indeed, sure. Not giving the game away. So, Josh, had you seen Small Soldiers before?
Do you know what, Alice? I had seen Small Soldiers
I had a
before.
feeling you
I
had done,
saw it at the
yeah.
pictures, I think. I definitely have
Did
seen it. I
you?
think
Oh,
I saw it at the
fun.
pictures. And I remember loving it when I was a kid.
Yeah,
I remember absolutely loving it as a kid. What about you? Had you seen Small Soldiers before?
I don't think so. Like, a lot of the sort of imagery felt familiar, and the fact that Tommy Lee Jones plays Chip Hazard, that kind of felt familiar as well. But I don't really remember sitting down and watching it. So I think I was just really aware of when it came out, maybe seeing the trailer on a VHS or whatever it may have been.
Yeah.
But I don't think I actually got around to sitting down
Oh,
and
right.
watching it. But I had heard of it, so there's that.
I thought we'd both have seen this one, but there you go.
Well, it's surprising that I didn't really, sort of around, about the right time. It's kind of like Terminator for kids, with all the fighting and the, explosives and the weapons. But no, hadn't got around to this one, surprisingly.
Okay, but no, so I was interested to go back to it as an adult.
With a critical eye,
with a critical
right?
eye and see what I thought. I have managed to avoid, the critical reception, but
Oh, good.
let's get stuck in and let's see what we think. If it's so Simon reckons it's underrated and a bit underseen, but I think the prime thing is underrated, but it's a bit of both. So what did we like then? What did you like going into it? Having not seen it before, what did you think?
So in general, I thought it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't like buzzing after watching it,
No.
but I think there were a lot of aspects to it that I did like and that I
Yeah.
could really see the value in. So I love the concept. I think the concept is great. It's almost like you are bouncing off Toy Story a bit, but it's going one step further. A, because the toys are in a live action world, and B, the toys interact with the humans instead of pretending that they aren't sentient.
Yeah.
I think it looks brilliant for the time, especially. The way they've animated the toys, I think, still looks great. It hasn't really dated, and there's quite a lot going on visually because it's also toy focused, which means the filmmakers obviously had a lot of fun with the props, etc. There's a pretty cool montage near the beginning of the film where you're sort of seeing like it's like a 3D printer creating some of the main character toys, and this all just looked really impressive. And then later on, when the toys have arrived at the shop, they're breaking out of their packaging and stuff, and I was watching that scene thinking, I don't think you could make this look better even now, even though this was back in 1998.
Yeah, I mean, if they did it now, it'd probably be the CGI, whereas this is a mix of CGI, and I think it's a mix of CGI and puppetry.
Looks
That's
like it,
that's
doesn't it?
that's the
Yeah.
impression I get from it anyway. But no, you're right. It does look amazing. Like the concept is. I mean, it's almost limitless, isn't it? You could do so much with it. the idea of toys that you say the comparisons to Toy Story
Well, they are many.
but they're also inevitable, aren't they? Right?
Yes.
Especially because you've got that whole thing of DreamWorks. Is it DreamWorks and
Versus
Pixar? And they had
Yeah.
they had the whole thing of like A Bug's Life and Ants, and
Mhm.
other ones. Cars and
Yeah.
Planes is one, isn't it? I can't remember.
Yeah, I
but
think so.
there's comparisons all the time because I think there's definitely been some sort of like intellectual property related shenanigans has gone on there. But I would
Drama.
not
Well, there's
possibly.
similar vibes, aren't
Yeah,
there? Similar
yeah.
vibes coming from both of them. They're sort of
yeah.
quite similar kind of audience and methods and stuff.
So the comparison's inevitable, but we're not talking about Toy Story. We're talking about this. Yeah, it looks great. I mean, the concept to the execution is really, really good. So you've got like the names of the soldiers are all like really ridiculous names, like you say, Chip Hazard, who has a hazardous chip. Eh? I see the writer. I see what you're doing
I
there.
see you.
eh?
I see all your hard
Clever
work.
layers, isn't it? It's layered. Then you've got like there's one called like Nick Nitro, another guy that's like it's basically like they took the cast of Predator and then like turned them into toys. So I love that. Loved all the look of the Gorgonites. It's very Ray Harryhausen, Jason and the Argonauts and King Kong and that sort of thing like that.
Right. Okay.
That so they sort of look like they're made out of claymation. Do you know what I mean? At points, so that's really good. The animation of them, there was some questionable CGI, but I'll let it go. To be honest, the look of the Gorgonites I think is really good because the animation of them when they're moving, I think is pretty good. And then just the overall inventiveness of the film. Like I took a lot of it for granted, but then as I was going along, I was like, someone's had to sit and think about how teeny tiny soldiers would make weapons out of like lawnmowers
Yes,
and
indeed.
like
A toaster.
a
At one
toaster
point, they
and-
put CDs in a toaster.
Yeah.
Obviously, tried to toast the CDs, so then they catch fire and then launch the CDs at people.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
Yeah.
bold, creative.
Yeah, so
inventive.
it's the star of the show is definitely like the inventiveness and the creativity and the concepts.
Mm.
Like same as you. So I suppose I haven't really said yet. I did enjoy it.
Mhm.
It's definitely not made for a 31-year-old bloke, as far as I can tell. But and there are flaws which we'll come on to. But I do think that overall it's inventive, it's clever, and I think you could show that to a 10-year-old, 9-year-old now, and they'd probably still like a lot of it.
I reckon so. Did you feel nostalgic when
Yeah,
you were watching it?
it's like anything, isn't it? Of around that time, there are films from around that time that aren't even any good. That make me feel that make like for example, I don't know. Other people may feel differently, but like the 1998 or 1999 Godzilla, like
Right.
it's shite. It's not very good, but I like have a real affection for it because when you see something you're blown away by scale and size and stuff, it's it sticks with you when you're a kid.
Oh yeah.
And then that's I suppose that brings back to another point, which is they do some really good stuff in this with scale, except it's scaled down rather than scaled up, which is back to that inventiveness. There's some good sort of little elements of comedy in there from the ridiculousness of it. You've got a lot of really good comedy actors in there. You've got a really good great cast. So you've got is it Gregory Smith who's the lead, Kirsten Dunst, but then you've got like David Cross, Dennis Leary, Jay Moore, I think it's Jay Moore. Or more, Kevin Dunn, and then obviously Phil Hartman, it's his last film role.
Yeah.
Sadly before
That voice,
before his death.
that voice,
Yeah,
just iconic, wasn't it? I
It
was like,
is.
is that Troy McClure?
yeah, and obviously it's his last film role, which is it's awfully sad what happened to him. We're not about making you sad. So Google it if you want to know what happened to Phil Hartman. It's really really sad. But it's a really good supporting cast, and their chops and their timing carry a lot of it. And I think it really comes into its own for me in probably the last half an hour, the final act. It builds up really, really well. So yeah,
The action, the action really ramps
It
up,
does,
doesn't it? And you do get like a full on assault.
It's like
And
it's like a Home Alone meets Saving Private Ryan.
yeah,
at the
I
end, innit?
definitely felt Home Alone vibes.
Yeah.
Definitely, because you're making use of what's around you, like these everyday objects and everyday utensils, but you can turn them into killer weapons,
Yeah.
and that's pretty cool.
So what else then? Was there anything else you liked?
So I thought the score and the soundtrack were brilliant.
Yeah.
So the score at times it was very dramatic and very militant, which makes everything feel like quite exciting and tense. But then you also had some like Danny Elfman style playfulness in there as well when focusing on the kids and their relationships, especially between Alan and Christy, who's like his love interest. And soundtrack wise, you've got Led Zeppelin, the Spice Girls, Rush, Queen, with so many more in there as
And
well.
it's not often you get Led Zeppelin given permission.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
so they don't. They
interesting,
famously
yeah.
don't like they, are really reluctant to let their music be used in films. So like,
No stairway denied.
yeah. So there's
I've been waiting to use that
if you
quote in
think
real
about
life again.
yeah, I'm trying to think of examples where other than this. Obviously, you've got Thor, but that's in Ragnarok. They
Oh,
use
yeah,
they use
massive, yeah.
Immigrant Song about 10
Yeah,
times.
a
But
lot.
obviously,
Yeah.
that's from Marvel. They must have gone. We have unlimited money.
We
So,
have $50 million.
yeah.
Please let us
The
use just
only-
10 seconds of your
I'm trying
song.
to think of the other ones I can think of. Oh, School of Rock uses the Immigrant Song, but to get it to be in School of Rock, Jack Black literally begged them. Like,
Did he?
there's a video I remember because School of Rock is like one of my favorite films. So on the DVD,
Oh, love
there's
it,
an
yeah.
extra, and it's just Jack Black begging Led Zeppelin for the bit where they play the concert at the
That's
end.
so funny.
They play the concert
yeah,
at the end.
Yeah.
Well, they recorded that. They must have recorded that first or before they did the other bit with the Led Zeppelin song in it. So in it, he has all the crowd and they're like going, please let us use the Immigrant Song in
Oh, really?
in this
Wow.
film. And so
That's a nice bit of trivia.
the fact that they chose to do it for a film about little small soldiers is
Interesting.
I wonder what swayed them. Money? Probably just money.
Sway them. It's hard to say, isn't it? And because even when you think about some of the people who were involved, like some really big hitters in there as
Yeah.
well. And I think like two of the voices of the Gwendy dolls was Sarah Michelle Gellar and Christina Ricci and stuff. And if you look at like the credits, that a lot of sort of famous names did
all
pop
of
up. So
all of
it
Spinal
felt
Tap.
like all of Spinal
All of
Tap,
Spinal
and then
Tap.
it was who else was playing all the? Someone else was playing like a whole bunch, like another an American band or something was playing like a load of the Commander
Yeah,
Elites.
yeah.
Oh, I can't remember who it was, but I saw that come up as well. So it was just interesting that a lot of big names seem to get involved, or like a lot of people seem to be really excited about it, or there was a big
Just
budget and they were able to pay
all
them.
money. Yeah.
So I do wonder how, if you're like what you said about Led Zeppelin being reluctant to let people use their songs. I wonder what happened there. I wonder if there's a DVD extra somewhere of someone begging,
just
"Please, Mr. Zeppelin."
Led Zeppelin going, no, and then the director going,
Not happening. You want it for what?
it's about-
a film about what?
this director goes, it's about little soldiers that come to life.
Yeah.
Use whatever you want.
Yeah, I'm sold.
But yeah, no, the music is
but
good.
yeah. It is good, and it just all the sounds together, and that coupled with the score, it all feels like it really adds to the atmosphere. It felt very cool, very upbeat and fast paced, and I could just really imagine that if you saw this as a kid, that you would think that it was just so cool, and that all of those things sort of put together, the visuals and the sounds, I reckon it would be an awesome time. And I wish I'd seen this as a kid, because I bet I would have loved it.
Well, I did, because I remember there's a lot of bits in it I didn't remember, but the whole bit where they burst through the garage door playing, whoa, yeah, that bit.
Yeah,
I remember
cool,
that bit because,
cool.
that bit's basically in it for the trailer, isn't it? Like, because I remember the trailer being that, and then the guy saying, you put munitions, chips, and toys, David Cross, because that's a trailer in it explaining the concept of a film in a minute or whatever. But yeah, no, I remember coming out of the cinema and really loving it, and like my friends loving it and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, definitely. I think it definitely gets a lot of stuff right, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely for a sort of kids / family film. And one of the things I did note as well, that even though it is led by a very young cast, they're not like, they don't feel too childish.
No.
Like, you don't feel super disconnected, because I think I've said this before, but there's always a risk when you have very, very young actors, like child actors in these lead roles. Are you going to lose the adults? Like, are they going to disconnect because they can't relate to these kids? The things that they like are too childish, so it is mostly just for the kids. But I think they did a really good job. Like the two, so Kirsten Dunst and what was the young lad's name who plays Alan Abernathy?
He's definitely called Gregory. I want to say Smith.
Greg.
Yeah.
Gregory.
Yeah.
So Gregory and Kirsten, I think, were really good, and they had quite a nice chemistry
they
together
did,
as well,
they
even
did.
considering they were so young.
Okay, so let's move on then to talking about things that we perhaps didn't like or that we'd change about the film. Now, what do we think, Alice? Because it's not perfect. Well, nothing's perfect. Set this podcast.
Well,
Cheers,
yes, I
Simon.
mean, well,
Cheers,
Simon.
Simon.
Our perfect podcast.
Simon, thank you. Anyway, yeah, what didn't you like about the film? Is there much, or was it overall okay, or what? Hit me with it.
So it's not, this isn't a dislike, but like I said, I came away from it and I just didn't feel the thing, right? I didn't feel the thing. And I was like, I just felt, I suppose, I wouldn't go as harsh as to say underwhelmed, but I just didn't feel much. So then I tried to analyze, well, why is this? And so
And
in
why
general,
is it?
I've got,
Why is it?
well,
Why is it?
well, I've got 3 points that sort of all lean into one another and all kind of come down to the same problem. So I needed to be more emotionally invested in the toys, right? So in their relationships to one another, in their relationships with the human characters. And I think this mostly comes down to having a pretty simple script that just missed a few beats, right? So I need a bit more backstory as to why the Commando Elite want to kill the Gorgonites. I need a bit more from their conflict to fully buy into it. So you know how Buzz Lightyear kind of fully believes that he's an astronaut, and you get to see some of his backstory like through adverts and such, and then a bit similar with Woody as well, where you kind of understand what his motivations are and what their narrative is as a toy and why that matters.
What does
And
the
for
toy?
these
What does the
guys-
toy represent in it? It's like
what does the toy represent? Exactly, Josh. And I just didn't really feel that with this. It felt like, because the only reason that they are sentient is because these guys have used these like military grade chips to put in them. It's like, that's the thing. And so they are just alive, like if you put a chip in your toaster or something. But I wanted a bit more. Give me like maybe a cartoon that they're in, and show some emotional peril
Yeah.
and some emotional depth or something. Why do I care about the Gorgonites?
But
I
that
need
is
to
a-
care
yeah,
about them.
That is a problem with the script, though, isn't it? Because they, instead of doing that, what they do is make up that they're enemies on the spot. So the guy,
it
like
felt a bit like
the guy,
that.
the
Yeah,
millionaire
well,
goes, "Oh, you've got this line of soldier toys, and you've got this line of monster toys, and they're separate." And then he goes, "Well, now they're enemies."
So, and I wonder then, is the whole thing a commentary on when you're doing things just for money, like it does lack the soul, right? Because I
yeah.
suppose I didn't feel much heart and I didn't feel much soul, but the whole point, the whole opening of the film is that this guy just wants to make tons and tons of money. He doesn't care how, it doesn't matter if these toys are dangerous, like what's going to sell, what's good. So I wonder if it does relate in that way, and I suppose in that way it does make a bit of sense. The other thing as well is that, so the toys' interactions with the human characters were really surface level. Like they didn't get engrossed in long character building conversations and would often just sort of answer each other with one word. And Archer, the Gorgonite, just very often ended up repeating himself, like just repeating like these set lines of dialogue, almost like how Woody is when he's pretending to just be a toy.
Yeah.
Like, there's a snake in my boots. It was just kind of, just felt like that sort of over and over again. And sometimes the toys would speak and there would be a bit of a pause before the humans would answer, which for me indicated a bit of a disconnect in the action and in the script. So obviously it would have been very difficult to act under these circumstances, right? But a lot of the time it feels like the direction was just kind of, right, so now the toy has said XYZ, so you need to look sad or look angry or whatever. And it was just that, and there was no, like, where's the guy with the tennis ball on his fingers or something, you know, acting alongside the kids. It felt like all that was missing, and that the kids were literally just looking at a toy, unanimated, no one reading the lines, or at least no one reading the lines in any significant or sort of emotive way. And the script just always felt like every pause between dialogue just felt like a split second too long. So it felt like, just, I suppose, just reminded you that you're watching a film sort of thing. Like, and I guess it didn't flow properly. And I just wanted more depth from it, I think. And I wanted to care more. And I wonder if I'd seen and loved this film as a kid, if I would feel those things. Because I know that Ewoks Battle for Endor is hardly boasting the most complex script ever, right? But
What?
the nostalgia is doing, I know, shocking, but the nostalgia in that film is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for me. So this makes me think that they wanted to keep this script a little bit more simple, maybe so that the kids could follow, so that there was no confusion on their part. So it was very clear who these guys are, who those guys are. But it just left me wanting a bit more. I just wanted to be emotionally invested. I wanted to cry at the end, Josh. When the Gorgonites sail off into the sunset, I wanted to cry. Like, I wanted to feel that moment, and I just didn't.
It's an interesting point, that, because I suppose I didn't see Ewoks when I was a kid. And I didn't.
And yet you still thought it was amazing, right? Incredible.
And it was
cinema
it was
award winning.
a masterpiece. It was. No, but when we did that, I didn't have that emotional connection to it. So
and I cried all the way through.
Perhaps that's similar to this. So we have picked up on very similar things, because I noticed that as well. And I think it comes down to one issue, right? And this is sort of killing me a little bit to say. It's killing 8-year-old me. And it doesn't mean it's not underrated, because we'll look at the critical reception. But there's one main flaw with this film, right? It doesn't know who it's for.
Okay.
It absolutely reeks of a studio giving multiple writers a go. And then going.
Well, and there were.
So there's about 4 writers on it, right? Because two of them are Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, who did all the Pirates, most of the Pirates of the Caribbean, Mask of Zorro, other stuff. So, established blockbuster cinema writers, they know what is a hit. They know punchy dialogue. They know how to entertain an audience, right? I don't know if they did a go-over of it or if they had the original idea. But anyway, for me, the whole film reeks of multiple writers having a go and ultimately not knowing who it's for, right? So I feel like it needs to pick an audience and commit to it. And it doesn't. And all the issues in the film, that lack of engagement and that lack of depth, I think, come from that. If you think about it, it's a halfway house between a kid's film, a family film. But yeah, not a kid's film, a family film. And a sort of like a teen film. Because you've got jokes in there that, and we've talked about this before with things like Road to El Dorado and Mouse Hunt and other films, where there's jokes for the parents that land, because they're like going, we know you're watching this with your kids, so all this. But in this, there's a bit where there's a storyline about how Kirsten Dunst's character only dates older guys, and you're like, what film's that from? And then there's a joke in it about how because Alan sees the toys talking, his parents think he's on crack.
Yeah,
and you're like going.
She says, "Are you on
meth?"
She says,
and
like,
crack.
"Are you on crank? First? Are you on crystal meth? Are you on heroin or whatever?"
It doesn't really land. It really stuck out to me. I literally went, "What? What? Like crystal meth?"
Swear word as well.
There's
like,
a few swear words in it.
Language.
Kirsten Dunst's character seems way more mature than Alan's, and I think they're meant to be the same age. And you could argue that all girls are more mature than boys, but it really sticks out in this film. So I think that unbalanced, the joke about the drugs, the other stuff, the bit where the commando soldiers are perving on the knockoff Barbie dolls.
Yeah,
it's like,
that was
it's like there's a joke one of them makes about, like, can we have Shirley? He's basically going, can we like go and bang these toys? And it really sticks out. So if it's a kid's film, right, then you focus on the Gorgonites and the relationship with Alan, and then I think you might get that payoff at the end of, like, Alan really loves them. But because they don't commit to that, and they don't commit to being teen as well, I think the other thing you get is that Alan is a bit of a moody teenager in it, and there's there's references in it that he's been kicked out of multiple schools and he's got behavioural problems, and everything he does in it, he just comes across like a bit of a teenage sort of brat. But if you had it based in misunderstanding or based in, well, it's not his fault because X, Y, and Z, then that's how it works. So I think there's a bit of an issue with that, and then that causes other issues as well, like pacing. It's an hour and 50 or an hour and 45 or something like that. They put way too much time into the beginning into telling you how the chips get into the toys. It's about half an hour before you see any toys, and the whole film is based on it's like soldier toys that are real. So there's a bit of that. I think like I say, we need more on Alan's backstory in order for it to be he's our hero. We need to care about him.
I need to care about him because I wanted to care about him, because the fact that his dad basically leaves him to look after the shop and then has a go at him when he doesn't do a great job, I was like, well, hang on a minute. He's like 14. A 14-year-old lad. Like, you're putting a lot on his shoulders there. So with things like that, I was like, oh, does he feel a bit mistreated by his parents? Does he feel like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders? Does he feel like he's under too much pressure given his age? But then it never quite sort of went over the edge of being like, oh yeah, he's just really hard done by and I really care about it and I'm so sorry that you're miserable and all this. Like with John Connor in Terminator 2, where it's like, God, I'm so sorry this has happened to you. I feel the weight on your shoulders. And with him, it just didn't quite make it. Everything just sort of felt a little bit like it was almost there. And I think this is exactly what you were saying about when you've got too many writers, like a point gets made and they think, oh yeah, this is good, let's include that. But instead of like filling that out and sort of making that a really full and deep point, it's just, oh, but I've got another point and I think we need to get that in there too.
Yeah.
Oh, we need to show off more of the toys and, we need to show off more of the CGI or the puppetry or whatever it is that we're doing. And so some things just got a bit left behind, I think.
I think that's why it comes into its own towards the end, because it's all action, not dialogue, right? So
Yeah,
I think there's, it's not, it's not awful. I just think I think
No.
what's more irritating about it is that it's wasted potential.
The potential.
You know,
the potential,
and if they'd
the
have just
concept is great.
if they'd have just committed to an audience,
Mhm.
it's a bit like we talked about with a little bit more with Just My Luck, when we were like, is it a teen comedy or is it a rom-com? Because they're sort of too young for it to be a rom-com, but they're too old for it to be a teen film. It's
Yeah.
a bit like this. Do you want it to be about teenage angst and that, or is it a family film about little soldiers? Because for me, I'd go family.
Mhm.
Because it's, it is about toy soldiers. So I think that's what's frustrating about it. So it's a bit tonally all over the place, and that can only really be, for me, to do with they've obviously changed their minds as they've gone along and been like, who is this for? Who are we trying to, is it a 12A or is it a U?
Yes.
Who's it going to be? And so I think that's what, for me, really stood out as an adult. Having said that, and I'm making a point of saying this, I loved it when I was 8.
Yeah.
So,
maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. And I think I think I would have loved it too. And I think you can look at that and literally just think, yeah, that is so fucking cool. And I reckon as a 8 or 9-year-old, you'd be like, yeah, this is awesome. And I do think you'd really feel the energy. And as an 8 or 9-year-old, I don't think I was looking for as much emotional depth in my films. Do you know what I mean? So I do wonder if, sort of by accident, it's ended up being more of a kid's film because it's cool and it's loud and there's explosions and there's soldiers and aliens and all this stuff.
I think it's the wasted potential for me. As I say, I loved it when I was a kid, but looking at it now as an adult, this film had the potential, with the concept and the cast and other stuff, to be one of those films that we've talked about before, which is like that idea of name a Christmas film that's not about Christmas. You always watch it at Christmas, and like we've said, Mouse Hunt, Paddington, you've got Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and this could have been one of them. It could have been one of those absolute family classics, but they didn't set their stall out right, or they meddled along the way, and it ended up a little bit of a tonal mess. Okay then, well that's the good and bad out of the way, so let's move on to the critical reception. Now, I haven't seen the critical reception.
And
And
but if you were gonna whack
what would I
if you were gonna
say?
whack an hammer on it, Josh, if you were gonna throw a guess at me, where are you at with this?
So how do I think it did? What would I give it? Probably like a 6, right? Out of 10. Okay, that's me now. And we've dug it out a little bit in the dislikes, but let's not forget there was a lot we liked about it as well.
Oh yeah.
I would probably say I reckon it didn't do well critically because of the things we've mentioned, because kids aren't film critics as far as I know. So adults are probably going into it saying similar stuff to what we've said, maybe. So I would reckon it's maybe getting I'd give it a 6, but I reckon they're probably harsher and maybe more of a 5. So give it to me.
Okay, so at the time of recording, over on IMDb, it gets 6.2 out
Okay.
of 10. And then over on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it 45% out of 100. And then the critics give it 49%. So the critics actually gave it a little bit higher than the audience, which surprised me a tad. So I reckon that's kind of about what you said, like 6. I do tend to find, I think, for the films that I'm not absolutely head over heels crazy about, that the IMDb score is usually pretty accurate.
Yeah.
So like that 6.2, I think is fair and is
I'd say so.
Is a correct assessment. I do think the Rotten Tomatoes scores, it's tricky because I can see where they're coming from, and I can see if you can't be emotionally invested in those characters, then it might be hard to love it. So So it's a tricky one. Like I can see where they're coming from, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Not that I necessarily agree.
yeah, I would say, I would align myself more with the IMDb score, but if you average it out, it's about just over a 5 out of 10, isn't it? So I would say, based on that, it's underrated.
Okay.
Would you
Okay.
agree with me?
I think if you're going for that low 5, I would say it's underrated because visually it was really impressive and you can see all the work that's gone into it. And the fact that I don't think it's aged poorly at all. Like if you look at other films from around the time who were maybe doing things as ambitious as that, and then even later, like into the early 2000s, some of the stuff has aged quite poorly. But I think it just looked fantastic and it was really colourful and it was really full and there was always so much going on the screen. And I can definitely see that as a kid that you would love this. So yeah, I reckon it is underrated, and I reckon it is probably a bit underseen now with modern audiences as well.
Maybe,
I don't know
it's
if
probably a good shout.
I don't know if people are going back to this. If people are sort of
because if
bringing it up again.
if you're like me, we're of the age where we watch this as kids, and now we might watch it with our kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I probably wouldn't show it. I wouldn't say my kids couldn't watch it, but I wouldn't be like, there are kids where there are films where you think I'm excited. You might be excited to watch that with my kids if kids are your thing. And this probably isn't one of them, and it's probably because of the reason we've said. But just to finish on, I do want to come back to that point, which is I loved this when I was a kid. So maybe it did the right thing, but definitely those scores, looking at what we've just said there, underrated for me. Would you agree?
I do agree. Underrated and a little bit underseen as well. Well, there we go. Small Soldiers, underrated and a little bit underseen as well. Thank you so much, Simon, for getting in touch with your suggestion. I'm so pleased I watched it. This was one, like I knew it, but I just couldn't remember if I'd seen it, and I don't know if I ever would have seen it if you hadn't suggested it. So thank you very much for suggesting it. That was a good one, I think, and a good episode. Right then. Oh, it's my favorite time. My favorite time of the podcast. Josh, you're picking next week's film. What are we going to be watching? You better wow me. I want this to be amazing. I want my head to explode with this choice. Go on. What you got?
Next week we are watching Rocky Balboa. That is the 2006 Rocky film. Rocky Balboa. That is what we're watching.
Rocky Balboa.
It is
interesting.
And we'll say no more. We'll say no more. Because I got stuff to say. I got stuff to say. So,
how very exciting.
Yes, join us next week when we will be talking about Rocky Balboa from 2006. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We are on all the social medias: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Check us out. Search for Just Films and That, Just Films and That Pod. You'll find us. We're always trying to put stuff out there. Get in touch. We'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear what films you think we should do, because Simon did. We're also on the television set, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. We are on the local TV network every Friday from 6 p.m, talking about all our favourite underrated and underseen films. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. Or if you have Sky and you live anywhere in the UK, you can find us on Channel 188. That is every Friday from 6 p.m. on the local TV network.
Yes, there we go. All that remains to be said is thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week. It's goodbye from me. Cheerio!
Bye!